Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Bennett. I'm Executive Director of Nord Compo, and I am thrilled to be here with two executives from Microsoft, Steve Clayton and Greg Shaw. Steve Clayton has held pivotal roles in communications at Microsoft for over 25 years. He's currently Vice President of Communications Strategy, and in that role, he's leading Microsoft Communications Strategy team, reporting directly to the Chief Communications Officer. His team is at the forefront of transforming Microsoft's communications operations through the strategic use of AI, not surprising, focusing on automating core processes and developing a cutting-edge measurement and insights platform. But in addition to driving innovation in communication strategy, Steve and his team oversee media relations, no easy task at Microsoft, of course, agency partnerships, Microsoft PR events, community engagement, and CEO keynote demonstrations. And as a trusted company spokesperson, he represents Microsoft in conversations with media, customers, and key stakeholders. He and his team articulate the company's vision and strategy around AI technologies and products. Greg Shaw, whom I've worked with for a few years now, has just the most amazingly diverse background I've seen in a long time. Besides his work at Microsoft in publishing and communications, he's the founding editor of 8080 Books, which is the Microsoft imprint, and has served as editor-in-chief at Microsoft for the past 13 years. He's also the founder and principal of indie publisher Clyde Hill Publications, and he's a prolific author, co-author, and ghostwriter. His most recent book, Last One Walking, The Life of Cherokee Community Leader Charlie Soap, was published by Oxford University Press. He has co-authored several influential books on business, technology, and society, including the book Hit Refresh by Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and Reprogramming the American Dream by Microsoft CTO Kevin Scott. Both were published by HarperCollins. Before joining Microsoft, Greg spent 9 years as a senior executive at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. His earlier career includes leadership roles at the very large indie PR agency Ketchum Communications in Washington, D.C., and public service positions within the U.S. Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In his spare time, he's also an angel investor, supporting emerging ventures and ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. And this is actually me and not an AI speaking.
Excellent. Okay, well, today we're going to be talking about AI. Are you guys being Microsoft or representing Microsoft? Our audience is very interested. Our audience is mainly publishers, of course. So let's get started. Microsoft is one of the largest and most successful companies in the world. What is the motivation for starting up a small publishing company inside Microsoft, Greg?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us. You know, having been around publishing for a long time and been around Microsoft for a long time, I get to see ideas that emerge from New York in the literary world, and I get to see ideas that emerge from the West Coast, Silicon Valley and Seattle and tech people. And I often find there's a disconnect in terms of timing. The ideas that are coming out of the West Coast are not yet ideas that have come to fruition. And so what we're trying to do with 8080 Books is bring forward ideas maybe before their time, but to bring people into the conversation of what's to come.
Excellent. And just for our audience being publishers, how many books do you plan on publishing a year or a month? Or
I'm actively editing 15 books now. We've got 5 books that are complete and published or about to be published. You know, I don't know that we're looking for a particular number each year. I think some years may be more than others. We're more interested in the ideas and the authors. So yeah, I think it may average something like a dozen or so. You know, we're not ever going to be a big five, and we are happy to partner with Big Five and other publishers. We're just interested in bringing forward good books, good ideas, and good writing.
and those books, Greg, are they for an audience, a general audience, or for a very specific niche audience? You know,
The answer is that they are for everyone.
okay.
I'm not going to say that it's a niche audience. You know, Mark Andreessen was famous for saying that software is eating the world. And what he means by
Mm.
that, he doesn't mean that software is eating niches of the world. He means that the entire world is becoming a software world. So I don't know why we would categorize people who use or work with software as some kind of niche. Every sector of business, every sector of the economy and society today has very essential software elements. And so, in the same way that we want to learn about how politicians and artists and sports people think, why shouldn't we be asking, how do software developers think?
I've seen some of the books that you've published. We've worked on some of them together. And I just remember reading through some of Marcus's book, your CTO, I think, of Microsoft Azure. And I wish I could say I could actually understand what I read. I'd be
Well,
lying.
yeah. Well, if you didn't, then that's a failure of the editor at 8080, and not Marcus's. So I apologize for that.
Okay. There's a lot of technical stuff, but some of the other books, yeah, I can see are very general interest. So let me ask you another question, Greg. You've been the manager of a huge foundation. You've been a highly successful author and ghostwriter. You've been a PR executive, and you've been, and maybe continue to be, an angel investor. What on earth made you want to found and manage an independent publishing company, which is some people consider torture?
Well, I wrote a little piece about that. I have only ever been interested in publishing ever since I was a kid. I remember being probably 6 or 7 years old and creating a highly organized library in my house. I've always loved publishing and writing and reading and books. And I'm not very good at small talk. And what I have found is that the more I talk with people about books and ideas that they have about books, the happier I am and the happier they are. So it's just something that I don't just like to do. It's something that I absolutely love doing. Yes, there are frustrating elements of it, but it's really what I love doing. I started off as a journalist. I still consider myself a journalist. And, I think it's the one thing I can do. My wife will tell you I can't fix anything around the house, but I know how to, I sort of know how to do books.
Well, I can confirm that you know how to do books, that's for sure. Steve, let me ask you a question. Book publishing as a whole is a low margin, slow to no growth business in general. And most of the growth in the past few decades has come from digital, ebooks, which have sort of plateaued at around 15%, and audiobooks, which has reached 15% in the US and continues to grow quickly. But from where you stand, do you see opportunities for growth in specific genres in international markets or other formats with or without AI?
I think in general, I see, Larry, room for growth in, I will call it physical devices. So Greg knows this, but you may not. One of my other projects at Microsoft is publishing a magazine. And, who would have thought Microsoft in 2025 would be publishing a 126-page, editorially led magazine?
No
And
one.
no one, right. And so people ask me, why on earth are you doing that? People ask me, why on earth am I involved in 8080 books? And partly it's just, a love of reading and a love of writing. But also I think it's a reaction to, I don't know anybody that's sat there saying, what I need today is some more digital information. We're awash in digital information. And, there's signal out there. You only have to look at the recorded music industry and the growth of vinyl, and amazingly the sort of the regrowth of cassette tapes, which is, let's put it mildly, not the best format for audio. But people are signaling this desire to have analog, to have something physical, to have something that is they can sit down with, that is just more thoughtful, and is getting them away from their screen in some ways.
Wow, yeah, that's such an interesting answer, Steve, because we've asked other people in other interviews, people from BISG, Book Industry Study Group, from Ingram, and that's no one has given that kind of an answer. That's really a great insight. And the analogy with a vinyl coming back and cassette tapes, yeah, that really resonates. I can see it, and I have a 22-year-old daughter, and she doesn't like audiobooks. She really likes paper.
Hmm.
And I guess that's why paper has stayed at 70% of the market, despite Back in 2007, 8, 9, people thought that it was going to become 20% of the market. But
Well, yeah, I have a 13-year-old, and she's a voracious reader. And I personally am more of an audiobook person just because I'm a slow reader, and so I use audiobooks. But I don't know, I read this somewhere. I don't know the detail of it, but I think I read that there's some science behind people remember stuff more if they've read it on paper, and like the physical. I certainly do. So I don't know. I just that I sort of like to say about certainly about the magazine and the books. When I give people a copy of one of our books or the magazine, they often hold it up to their nose and they smell it and they say something like print. And when was the last time somebody held up a cell phone to their nose and said digital? It just doesn't happen.
yeah,
There's this physical, visceral interaction that you have.
it's like slamming a car door and getting that feeling of heft, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, Steve, that you mentioned that because I can very often remember like which side of the page something was on. So I might go back and I think it was somewhere back in here. I certainly couldn't do that with you're at Kindle position 1047 or 18 minutes into an audiobook. But I like all three formats because I just enjoy consuming so much. So if I'm in the car driving, I can listen, or if suddenly I discover something, I'll download a sample on Kindle if I'm not, nearby some place to remember to buy the book. So I'm kind of a book junkie, I guess.
I'm like you, Greg. Let's pivot now and talk about what's on a lot of publishers' minds. Authors and publishers alike are deeply concerned about the rights issues relating to the training of AI and large language models or LLMs. What's Microsoft's position and your own opinions on the issue of fair use? Should books still under copyright be available free of charge for LLM training purposes?
Yeah, I'll give you my opinion, and I really can't answer the question on behalf of Microsoft. If you'd like to talk with someone who's more astute in the legal and policy field, it wouldn't be a crazy editor like me. But you mentioned a book that I wrote called Last One Walking, which is the story of Charlie Soap, a Cherokee leader. And it's really a book about what happened to the Cherokees after the Trail of Tears. So we know a lot about we know a lot about the Trail of Tears, but what happened after the Trail of Tears is the subject of that book. Now, in publishing it, there's a lot of Cherokee words in it, and the Cherokee words are both phonetic and in the Cherokee syllabary. I'm telling you this story because I wanted, as an author, for that book to be in an LLM somewhere. To not be in an LLM is further disappearing Indian people, Native American people. That book and the way that Charlie thinks and approaches things, and his wife, Wilma Mankiller, I believe is a way of making that thinking, that language, the culture, and the history more accessible, whereas it was not accessible before. So I actually moved towards LLMs with that.
Hmm.
Do authors deserve to be paid for what they're doing? Absolutely. Do publishers deserve to have access and make money? Absolutely. The economics of that and the American law and European law and other national laws, I'm just not an expert at.
No, and it keeps changing anyway. If you're an expert today, you might not be an expert tomorrow. We get all these legal briefs from the industry, like Publishers Weekly and the Anthropic case and the other 15 cases. And so I guess our audience is just confused.
Well, several of my books were in that Anthropic agreement, and I don't think I've seen a check yet, but
Well, don't plan on paying your next rent bill with it either. But all right, let's talk about how AI and publishing. The last 3 decades, we've seen a wave of consolidation among book retailers, pretty obviously distributors, wholesalers, and of course publishers. So this has given rise to clusters of power: Amazon, Grim, RH, Elsevier, etc. Do you guys see AI as a potential tool to start to level the playing field? And if you think so, how would that work?
Steve, I can.
Yeah, you should take a shot, Greg. You're more sophisticated at understanding that landscape than I am, so I'm keen to hear what your answer is.
Well, again, I am kind of a crazy guy. I was walking through my little hometown this morning and I noticed an old ice house. There used to be a day where if you wanted ice, you had to go to the one ice house in town to get ice. Now, in New York City, they probably had, Larry, probably a number of ice houses, but what freezing and refrigeration did was democratize ice. Not a popular word today, ice, but I'm talking about the frozen kind of ice. We managed to democratize ice. Not everyone had to go to the same ice house to get it. And I think that will certainly happen. I think it will lower the barriers to entry. That being said, literary works will, and I write a Substack about this to plug my Substack, the Humanist Keyboard. I believe that it will always be up to a human editor and a human writer to write something and edit something and produce something that other humans can connect with at a truly human, and I'll even say spiritual level. I think there's a type of publishing which is, let's call it the most sort of basic information. I think, certainly if you buy something on Amazon and get the technical instructions on how to put that thing together, I think all of us would probably agree AI could write instruction manuals better than some people who send us instruction manuals. But I think literary fiction, literary nonfiction, poetry, things that we connect with at a human level are always going to have talented, thoughtful humans leading that, and very likely using AI to help them answer questions or be a thought partner. I was at the Gathering of the Ghosts, which Gotham Ghostwriters sponsored a month or so ago, and there was broad agreement that no one would use AI to actually write something, but everyone increasingly is using AI to answer questions, to get answers more quickly. You still have to validate the information that you get. And who doesn't need a thought partner to bounce an idea off of? AI is good at that.
Yeah, and you're really talking about the author's standpoint, but if you look at the giants in our industry today, the Ingrams, the PRHs, the Amazons, they've become dominant and hold on to that dominance through scale, right? Just like big tech companies.
Well,
And
I would say though that I believe in, how could I not if I'm at Microsoft? I do believe in competition. One of the companies you didn't mention in that group is Simon and Schuster, who is now doing the same thing that Ingram and Penguin Random House is doing. And so I think
Mhm.
the publishing industry is awakening, perhaps slowly, but is awakening to new areas to compete.
Yeah,
And I
no,
think if
and
I can add to that, you both are far more experts on this industry than I am, but two others I would add into that mix who served as inspiration for what we're doing with 8080 Books is Fitzcarraldo and Stripe Press, both very different companies. And it sort of depends how you measure success. You can measure it through scale and finance and revenues. But if I look at the success Fitzcarraldo's had from awards and from the volume that they sell, I think they fine example. And then for us with Stripe, both examples of what sort of helped inspire us get into this business with 8080 Books.
yeah, and I guess where I was kind of going with this, will AI make a difference in breaking down that dominance?
I believe it will because, what are the primary drivers of costs and expenses? It is, more and more staff. And yes, we need, certainly on the editorial side, very good and very talented staff, but there are also more back office and production oriented sides of publishing that can become more efficient. I
Hmm.
mean, I started off in newspapers writing my articles on an IBM Selectric, walking them over to my editor who would use a ruler to cut things up and paste them. I would go type it into a CompuGraphic computer, print out the film, wax it, use an X-Acto knife and a proportion wheel to get the photos to fit. You had to learn how to count the letters so that you knew how many picas and fonts could fit on the page. It certainly employed me, but did I enjoy doing that versus the writing? I would have loved to have had more time writing. And it wasn't very many years after that we suddenly had desktop publishing. So I think this is, at least in my short lifetime, is just another technology that is coming along, and it is a more powerful one. That is for sure. But I my recipe has always been to learn the technology rather than fear it.
Yep. Well, let's talk about AI in general. In his book, which is an amazing book, in my opinion, The AI Revolution in Book Publishing, Thad McElroy, an industry expert, posits that like the advent of railroads, steam engines, and transistors, AI is a potentially disruptive technology. Like many disruptive technologies, there will be winners and losers, of course. But overall, do you guys think long term it'll be good for the economy, job growth?
I think so. Absolutely. I think there's lots of questions we get just broadly on AI is, what's the impact going to be on jobs? And like all technologies, the ones that you mentioned, some jobs will go away. When I started in the PR business, much like, Greg and his typesetting, we would run around doing press clippings and nobody sits here lamenting the fact that we don't do press clippings anymore. And like those businesses and, entirely new jobs got created. And so
Hmm.
AI is absolutely revolutionary, arguably the most revolutionary technology, certainly of my lifetime, I would say, and probably others. And so I think it's gonna upend work for sure. It's gonna change people's jobs, and I think it's gonna hopefully create, significant productivity growth, which frankly the planet needs, just in terms of efficiency, speed, um, entirely new fields of scientific endeavor that it will make us capable of. So and there is no question that it is the most disruptive and transformative technology, certainly of, yeah, like I said, of my lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, my colleagues that are in editing can hear. I can sort of see the eye rolling. You're sitting there arrogantly and without empathy, talking about disruption. And I certainly understand it. I was describing the typesetting and the layouts. That was replaced by a product called Adobe PageMaker, which some people may be old enough to remember. I became a fanatically in love with Adobe PageMaker. I could probably, and then Adobe PageMaker went away because we had HTML and we began to do layout digitally. So these things happen. There is a book that 8080, Larry, you're I think working on the audio version of this. It's called Human Agency in a Digital World by Marcus Fontoura. I
Hmm.
call it the first AI self-help book. So we fear and we worry a lot about AI. And what Marcus is trying to do with that book is to say, let me at least try to inform you on where these technologies are and where they're going so that you have a factual understanding of what they're capable of, what they're not capable of. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do with 8080 is to be a trusted voice on where these technologies are going.
And some, you think that there'll be job losses, but job gains that will offset them. Am I hearing that?
Yes.
It's what we believe, and it's also what you know. Not that Nobel Prize winning economists are anyone to listen to, but if we do want to listen to them, that is what David Altor and a number of MIT and other economists are saying when they look at the diffusion of technology over history and its impact on the labor force.
Okay, let's talk about Copilot. Copilot, I think, is a great product. And Copilot and its competitors, we've seen the capabilities of AI are increasing at a rapid rate. There's updates every couple of weeks. How do you guys see AI's integration into the creative services, authoring, illustrations, music, that kind of stuff? I know it's a sensitive area for you as an author, Greg.
Maybe I can start, Larry, and I would say, I'm certainly not an author, but I write a lot of things. I publish something every Friday for the last 18 years. It's called The Friday Thing, and it's sort of my musings on whatever has caught my attention that day. And I would say probably one in four times once a month, I get a classic writer's block. I'm sat there on a Friday and I have this self commitment to say I'm going to publish something every Friday because I'm on this treadmill. And sometimes it feels like a treadmill. And there are times when I need inspiration or I need an idea and I'll turn to Copilot to help me ideate. But just more generally, as as a sort of rapid prototyping tool on the creative side. I think you mentioned illustrations there. I'm no illustrator, but if I want to engage an illustrator to help me illustrate a piece of my work, I can at least now go to them with a starting, because I've got this
Hmm.
rapid prototyping tool that I can use. Or if I'm researching a topic, and I do this at least once a week, researching a topic to go and talk to a customer. And so I'm talking to a customer this week, and I don't know a lot about them or the industry, but they've asked me to come and talk to them about AI in the business of communications. And I have this tool within Copilot called Researcher. And it truly is like having my own researcher sat next to me. And I could say, go and write me a 5-page paper that's well researched about this company. And so it's become to me an absolutely indispensable tool on the work side of my life, but also on the non-work side of my life. I find myself turning to Copilot. Great example was yesterday, my daughter, 16-year-old, came into the house and she said, I just found this stray dog outside. What do I do? And I'm like, I have no idea. And I thought I could phone a friend, I could go to a search engine, but I didn't. I went to Copilot and I said, what does one do in Seattle, in this neighborhood, if I found a stray dog? And within 10 seconds, I had an answer. Call the Seattle Humane Society and tell them that and just, it's become this completely indispensable tool for every hour of my life.
And there are so many things that I could say, but I'll say one thing that I think most every writer, author of any kind would identify with. You've written your 500 words or your 2,000 words or your 5,000 words, whatever it is that you write in a day. And then, your spouse is usually, so, you go and you say, would you please read what I've produced today? Because you need a reader. And depending on the day, the spouse might say, I'm really busy, or sure, I'll do it later tonight, or whatever, a partner or something. What I really appreciate with Copilot and or Claude, or, whatever the tool it is that you use, you can ask for another quote unquote set of eyes to look at something, and it'll tell you, and it might come back and tell you something really positive about what you've written. And I can say, no, I'm not looking for positive reinforcement. Be critical. And it'll come back and do something critical. Well, how would you fix it? Or what would you do? And so you've got a ready-made editor, and you'll use your judgment as to whether it's helpful or useful or not. But I have come to really appreciate that, so that when my wife has to look at my copy, or agrees to look at my copy, it's not necessarily my first draft. I've had to think a little bit more about it.
Great. So basically, to sum up what both of you are saying is in those services that like illustrations and music and authoring, it doesn't replace the human, but it helps the human get their job done. Is that
Yep.
fair?
Yep.
Okay. So one final question, nothing to do with AI. What advice would you guys give as experienced executives to an aspiring or recent graduate who is interested in, my goodness, getting into the book publishing industry?
Well, first of all, I'd say welcome and encourage it, unlike what maybe some others would say, which is, choose something more profitable or whatever. I think people who choose to go into publishing deserve publishing, and I mean that in the best way. But I would say the first step is, really be sort of specific about what area of publishing that you want to go into, and get good at it. Put the time and effort into it. Don't expect, I mean, it's a multifaceted industry. I think it's helpful to have several skills in publishing, maybe a skill in editorial, maybe a skill in marketing and promotion, and maybe a skill in design. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, but I would say
How
welcome.
about you, Steve?
Yeah, well, I would also say welcome. And I like something Greg said there, is like go and study the industry. And I say that as somebody who's becoming more of a student of the industry, but really sort of understanding in all of the different aspects of it, whether that's cover design or typography or layout or all of that, just having be sort of steeped in understanding it. And it will, and I would say that about all industries. I say that for people who are joining my teams, really study it and understand it at depth. And what that gives you is, frankly, it gives you credibility, but also I think gives you a real sense of which part of it is the part that you want to specialize on and be really, really deep on. And so I would say that. And then just more generally, I would say I have this phrase I say to people, and I say, read a lot, write a lot, and share generously. And that is something that I think, my friend Greg here does a lot. He reads a lot, he writes a lot, and he shares, whether it's through his Substack or emails he sends me, and is just curious and genuinely interested in the profession of not even just publishing, but writing and reading. And I think the most powerful thing in that is sharing. That's what I encourage people to do, is to share what you read and share what you write.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time. This has been absolutely fascinating, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.